Welcome to today's deep dive,
Yeah.
where we're going to be exploring diplomacy,
Okay.
leadership, and grand strategy through the eyes of Henry Kissinger. We're diving into Kissinger on Kissinger,
Oh, wow.
which is an oral history
Yeah.
where he kind of looks back and reflects on his career.
Awesome.
And I think what you'll find is whether you're
I think
history buff or just interested in how big decisions get made,
absolutely.
this deep dive
Yeah.
is going to offer some incredible insights
It does.
into world affairs.
Yeah, we're talking about a period
Yeah.
of immense change.
Yeah.
Cold War in full swing,
Oh, yeah.
Vietnam War
Yeah.
casting a long shadow,
Absolutely.
and Kissinger on Kissinger
Yeah.
really reveals the inner workings
Yeah.
of those high-stakes decisions.
Yeah.
From opening relations with China to
Right.
navigating détente
Yeah.
with the Soviet Union.
It's amazing to consider the context. We're talking about 1969,
Okay.
a world grappling with assassinations, riots,
Mm-hmm.
and a seemingly endless conflict in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And this is where we find Kissinger
Okay.
stepping onto the world stage
Right.
alongside President Nixon.
Right.
They shared this conviction
Mm-hmm.
that the global landscape needed a drastic change.
They did.
And America's foreign policy required a fresh perspective.
Yeah. It's fascinating how this partnership,
Yeah.
a seasoned politician
Yeah.
and an academic,
Right.
tackled this monumental task.
Yeah.
Kissinger, reflecting on their relationship,
Yeah.
says Nixon possessed this extraordinary grasp of the strategic impact of events.
Wow.
And he recognized that to achieve a stable world order,
Yeah.
engaging with China was essential.
That's right. And this wasn't just like some
Yeah.
small tweak to foreign policy.
Right.
We're talking about opening dialogues
Right.
with communist China
Right.
during the height of the Cold War.
During the Cold War.
It seemed like an impossible task.
It did too many.
Femini.
A sentiment even seasoned Russian experts echoed,
Really?
warning that such a move
Yeah.
could potentially trigger war with the Soviet Union.
So really high stakes.
High stakes indeed.
And yet both Nixon and Kissinger understood
They did.
that for any long-term stability,
Yeah.
China had to be part of the equation.
It's part of the equation.
Kissinger, in his strategic thinking,
Yeah.
believed that bringing China into the global arena
Right.
could actually serve to balance Soviet influence.
That's right.
This concept, referred to as triangular diplomacy, was a core element of their strategy.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm curious how they navigated the internal politics of such a bold move.
Yeah.
I mean, shaking things up
Yeah.
on a global scale must have created some waves domestically, too.
Absolutely, you're right.
Right?
They weren't exactly met with universal applause.
Right.
They overhauled the National Security Council,
Yep.
streamlining the decision-making process.
There were a lot of changes.
A lot of changes internally as well.
Kissinger recounts
Yeah.
how they created interdepartmental teams,
Yeah.
ensuring every agency had a voice, but remained focused on their ultimate vision.
I see.
This, of course, led to some friction.
It sounds like they were quite determined to
Yes, sir.
reshape the entire system.
Both Kissinger and Nixon
Yeah.
felt that a more efficient process was needed to achieve their long-term
Right.
strategic goals.
Yeah.
Particularly in a world demanding constant responses
Yeah.
to every crisis.
It must have been a bit like
Yeah, it must have been.
trying to assemble a complex puzzle while everyone around you is shouting different solutions.
Yeah. How did they even begin to prioritize amidst all that chaos?
Well, Kissinger describes their system as surprisingly structured. He meticulously prepared
Yeah.
detailed memos
Okay.
outlining the background, potential options,
Yeah.
and his suggested strategy before each trip.
Wow.
Nixon would then add his comments,
Okay.
giving Kissinger a clear directive to work with.
So very structured in a way.
This established a foundation of trust that was crucial,
Okay.
especially when dealing with the often rigid bureaucratic machine.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So with this new system in place,
Okay.
they set their sights on China.
Right.
What were the initial steps they took to open up this dialogue?
Okay.
It couldn't have been a simple phone call, right?
You're right, it wasn't a simple phone call.
No.
Kissinger embarked
Okay.
on 2 clandestine trips to China,
Wow.
laying the groundwork for what would become Nixon's historic visit.
Okay.
These secret meetings were crucial
Yeah.
in establishing a rapport
Uh-huh.
and understanding the nuances
Yeah.
of China's position.
It's almost like a spy thriller.
It is.
Secret meeting, Cold War tensions.
Uh-huh.
Was there a particular moment that
Yeah.
stands out as a turning point
Okay.
in those early exchanges?
I think the Shanghai Communique,
Okay.
a document produced after Nixon's visit,
Yeah.
offers a great example of their unique approach
Okay.
to diplomacy.
Yeah.
Instead of shying away from disagreements,
Ah,
they deliberately listed them
really?
alongside areas of agreement.
Okay.
Kissinger believed that transparency, even
Yeah.
about points of contention,
Mm-hmm.
was essential for building a foundation of trust.
That's counterintuitive.
It might seem so,
Yeah.
but Kissinger felt
Uh-huh.
that acknowledging the disagreements head-on
Okay.
actually served to highlight the areas where collaboration was possible.
I see.
This approach emphasized a commitment to open dialogue,
Mhm.
even about difficult topics.
Makes sense.
It was a gamble that
Yeah.
ultimately paid off,
Yeah.
setting the stage for a new era
Okay.
of U.S.-China relations.
So they had China on their radar.
They did.
But what about the other giant in the room?
Yeah.
The Soviet Union.
Right.
They were engaged in this
Right.
high-stakes balancing act.
Yeah.
Did opening relations with China
Huh?
negatively impact their relationship with the Soviets?
Actually, it had the opposite effect.
Really?
Initially wary,
No.
the Soviets proposed a summit with Nixon
Wow.
shortly after the China opening.
Interesting.
It seemed that rather than pushing the Soviets away, the bold move toward China
Yeah.
actually made them more eager to
Oh.
engage in dialogue with the
Wow.
U.S.
That's quite a turnaround.
It is.
So did Kissinger's gamble
Yeah.
of using closer ties with China
Right.
to improve relations with Moscow
Yeah.
actually work?
It appears so.
Wow.
The Soviets,
Mhm.
seeing the U.S. playing on a global chessboard
Right?
and making bold moves,
Yeah.
recognize a shift
Ah.
in the balance of power.
Right?
This, in turn,
Yeah.
made them more receptive to
Yes.
engaging with the U.S.,
Mhm.
hoping to secure their own interests
Think so.
in this changing landscape.
Yeah.
It was a high-stakes game of
Listen.
diplomatic chess.
It's incredible how
It is.
one seemingly impossible move
Yeah,
could create such a ripple effect
absolutely.
across the world stage.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the complexity
Uh-huh.
of their agenda.
Right.
They weren't just dealing
No, they weren't.
with China and the Soviet Union.
Right. Alongside navigating
Right.
these delicate relationships,
Yeah.
they were simultaneously tackling
Uh-huh.
various other diplomatic fronts,
Okay.
including negotiations over Berlin and, importantly, arms control.
Arms control during the Cold War.
It was a tense topic.
That must have been a tense topic.
The strategic arms limitation talks,
Yeah.
SALT hefts as they were known,
Uh-huh.
were incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Even Kissinger himself,
Mhm.
reflecting on these talks,
Yeah.
compares them to
That-
some
yes.
obscure 19th century
Huh.
European political problem
Wow.
that was so convoluted that
Okay.
even those who understood it
Yeah.
eventually forgot what it was about.
So we've got a world in chaos,
Yeah.
a new approach to diplomacy,
Mhm.
secret trips to China,
Yeah.
and incredibly complex
Absolutely.
arms control negotiations.
It's a lot.
How did they manage to juggle all these high-stakes issues?
Well, I think their success can be attributed to
Right.
that shared strategic vision we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They had a clear roadmap of their goals.
Uh-huh.
Were willing to challenge conventional wisdom
Yep.
and embraced bold, calculated risks. They recognized the interconnectedness
Uh-huh.
of global events
Okay.
and understood that solutions couldn't be found in
Yeah.
isolation.
Makes sense.
This was a crucial element
Yeah.
of their approach to foreign policy.
It's fascinating to see how they took a world on the brink
It is.
and through calculated risks
Uh,
and a clear vision
Yeah.
started to reshape
yeah,
the global landscape.
they did.
It really underlines how leadership isn't just about
Right,
reacting to events,
right.
but actively shaping them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a key takeaway from Kissinger's reflections is the significance of understanding different perspectives.
Okay.
He dedicated considerable time in negotiations to explaining America's long-term goals,
Yeah.
emphasizing that diplomacy isn't just about
Right.
getting your way,
Yeah.
but finding common ground.
It seems that's a lesson
It is.
that's more relevant now than ever.
Absolutely.
But we've only just scratched the surface
Yeah.
of this deep dive.
Yeah.
Up next, we're going to delve into Kissinger's insights
Okay.
on the personalities of some of the major players on the world stage.
Sounds good.
Trust me,
Okay.
you won't want to miss this.
I won't. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Henry Kissinger.
We've been exploring Kissinger's strategic thinking,
Yeah.
his bold moves on the global chessboard, but it's crucial to remember
Absolutely.
that even amidst those geopolitical strategies,
Yeah.
it's ultimately human interactions
Right.
that drive those monumental decisions.
You're right. That's what makes Kissinger on Kissinger such a captivating read.
Absolutely.
It provides these incredible glimpses
Yeah.
into the personalities and dynamics that
Yeah.
shaped history.
For instance, Kissinger recounts how Nixon's boldness
Okay.
sometimes even caught him off guard.
Really?
During the Moscow summit, Brezhnev unexpectedly whisked Nixon away
Wow.
to his private dacha, leaving everyone else behind.
That's interesting.
It's like a scene straight out of
It is.
a Cold War spy thriller.
It certainly sounds like one.
And what's even more fascinating
Yeah.
is how this seemingly impulsive act actually turned into a productive moment.
Okay.
Brezhnev, after hours of
Yeah.
intense discussion, shifts gears and says, okay, let's talk about
Yeah.
what needs to be done.
It's a striking example
Yeah.
of how personal relationships can influence even the most high-stakes diplomatic encounters.
Absolutely. And Kissinger,
Right.
despite being this master strategist, recognized the importance of building personal connections.
Right. He even developed a certain respect
Okay.
for his Soviet counterpart, Ambassador Dobrynin.
Yeah.
They were adversaries, of course.
Right.
But they also found ways to have frank, honest conversations.
It seems like a fine line to walk, engaging in open dialogue
Yeah.
with someone you fundamentally disagree with.
It is. But that's diplomacy at its core, right?
Right. Building bridges,
Yeah.
even fragile ones, in a world of shifting sands.
In a world of shifting sands.
And speaking of shifting sands, it's impossible to ignore Kissinger's involvement in the Middle East.
Right.
He was deeply involved in navigating the complexities of the Arab-Israeli conflict.
The Yom Kippur War in 1973
Yeah.
stands out as a pivotal moment.
A pivotal moment.
It caught many off guard, including, as Kissinger recounts, the U.S. intelligence community.
It did.
And this miscalculation highlights a crucial aspect of Kissinger's thinking, this constant need to adapt and reevaluate assumptions.
Yeah, in this case, the prevailing belief was that Israel would swiftly defeat the Arab armies.
Okay.
However, as the war unfolded,
the situation proved
Yeah.
far more complex.
So how did Kissinger,
Okay.
facing this unexpected turn of events,
Yeah.
approach the situation?
Well, he saw an opportunity to position the U.S. as the essential mediator,
Okay.
recognizing that America was perhaps the only power capable of bringing the warring parties to the table.
Yeah.
This meant navigating a very precarious balance.
I imagine it must have been
It must have been.
a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
On the one hand,
Right.
reassuring Israel of continued U.S. support,
Uh-huh.
while on the other hand,
Yeah.
convincing Arab states
Right.
that the U.S. could act
Uh-huh.
as an impartial mediator.
You're exactly right. It required him to deftly maneuver between these seemingly opposing positions.
Okay.
He managed to secure a ceasefire
Uh-huh.
and initiate the groundwork
Yeah.
for the eventual peace agreement between Israel and Egypt. It solidified Kissinger's reputation
It did.
as a master of realpolitik.
Now, this term realpolitik,
Yeah.
could you elaborate on what that means
Okay.
in the context of Kissinger's approach?
It's about understanding the world as it is, not as we wish it to be.
I see.
Realpolitik focuses on the balance of power,
Right.
the interplay of national interests, and recognizing the limits of ideology in shaping foreign policy.
So it's less about moral judgment and more about pragmatism.
Yes.
Okay.
It's about finding practical solutions to complex problems, understanding that those solutions might not always be ideal or morally clear-cut.
Okay.
Kissinger argues that realpolitik, while often criticized, aims to prevent conflicts from escalating into catastrophic wars by acknowledging the messy realities of global politics.
It sounds like a rather pragmatic...
It can be, even if a controversial way of looking at things.
But it also emphasizes the importance of engaging with all sides, even those you disagree with.
Exactly. It's about understanding their perspective, searching for common ground, no matter how narrow it might be. It requires tough choices, compromises, and accepting that you might not always get everything you want.
It seems like Kissinger, in his own way, was a master of navigating this complex web of global relations.
He was.
And one element that often stands out in Kissinger's reflections is his emphasis on the need for a coherent foreign policy, a strategic vision that guides decisions rather than simply reacting to events as they happen.
So it's about having a roadmap, a clear sense of direction, as opposed to being swept along by the tide of global affairs.
Exactly.
Kissinger believed that without this overarching vision, a nation could become a prisoner of circumstance.
I see.
This is where his concept of linkage comes in.
Okay.
The understanding that different issues, regions, and actors are all interconnected. You can't isolate one problem from another.
Can you give an example of how this concept of linkage played out in their foreign policy?
Take their opening to China. It wasn't just about improving relations with Beijing. It was a calculated move to influence the dynamics of the Cold War, putting pressure on the Soviet Union. Similarly, their approach to the Middle East was intertwined with a broader strategy of containing Soviet influence, demonstrating that American diplomacy was key to resolving regional conflicts.
So it's about understanding the bigger picture.
It is the long game, being willing to make moves that might not be popular in the short term, but ultimately serve those long-term interests. It's about strategic patience and recognizing those interconnected threads in the global tapestry.
Precisely.
Kissinger, reflecting on his time in government, expresses concern about the tendency of American foreign policy to swing between extremes. From isolationism to interventionism, idealism to cynicism.
I see.
He argued that this pendulum swing makes it difficult to maintain consistency, build trust with allies, and project a clear image of American power.
It seems like he's advocating for a more balanced approach.
Right. A middle ground where American values and interests are aligned.
That's right.
He believes the U.S. needs to find that equilibrium between its commitment to global leadership and the recognition of the limits of its power. It's a complex challenge with no easy answers.
Now, Kissinger's experiences, both his triumphs and his missteps, offer a valuable perspective for anyone grappling with the complexities of international relations.
Absolutely.
He brought this unique blend of historical knowledge and pragmatic thinking to the table.
You're right. One striking element in Kissinger's account is his profound respect for history. He consistently draws upon historical analogies and lessons to inform his analysis and decision-making.
It's not just about memorizing facts and dates for him.
No, it's about seeing history as a living force that shapes our present and future.
It's about learning from the past. Recognizing patterns,
Mm-hmm.
understanding the motivations and anxieties
Right.
of other nations,
Yeah.
and crafting strategies that are informed by the successes and failures
Absolutely.
of those who came before.
Right.
It's fascinating
It is.
how he brings this historical lens
Yeah.
to his analysis.
And that perspective, that ability to connect the dots across time is crucial for any leader,
Right.
any diplomat, anyone who seeks to make a difference
Absolutely.
in the world.
Yeah.
While some might criticize Kissinger for being too focused on the past,
Yeah.
I think his understanding of history was actually one of his greatest strengths.
It's easy to get swept up
It is.
in the day-to-day chaos and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
But having leaders who can think strategically, grasp those complexities,
Okay.
and make difficult choices, even unpopular ones, is essential.
Exactly.
Kissinger, despite the controversies surrounding his legacy, embodied that type of leadership.
He did.
He understood that decisions made today reverberate for decades to come.
Absolutely.
His story reminds us.
It does.
That even in a world dominated by nation-states and grand ideologies, it's individuals who ultimately shape history.
It is individuals.
So as we move towards the final part of our deep dive into Kissinger on Kissinger, I'm curious to explore his more personal reflections on leadership and diplomacy. Those behind-the-scenes insights that can inform not just world leaders, but anyone navigating complex situations.
Absolutely.
What are some of the key takeaways he offers in those reflections? Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring the world of Henry Kissinger.
We have.
Through his own words, his successes, his controversies, and his unique perspective on history.
It's a fascinating story.
But now I want to shift gears a bit.
Okay.
And focus on something he emphasizes throughout Kissinger on Kissinger.
Okay.
The actual process of leadership and diplomacy. It's one thing to talk about grand strategy.
Sure.
But how does that translate into action?
Yeah, that's where his insights become incredibly valuable. Not just for those at the highest levels of government, but really for anyone in a position of leadership. One of the most striking things he highlights is the importance of clear communication. And he's not simply talking about being articulate or skilled orator.
So it's more than just choosing the right words.
It is. It's about really understanding the other side's perspective. Even if you completely disagree with them, you need to be able to explain your own position in a way that resonates with them to find some common ground, some shared understanding, even amidst those differences.
That can't be easy.
It's not.
Especially when you're dealing with people whose ideologies are fundamentally opposed to your own. Did Kissinger offer any specific examples?
He did.
Of how he approached these kinds of difficult conversations?
He talks about how he would spend hours, sometimes days, patiently explaining America's long-term goals to his counterparts. Whether it was Zhou Enlai in China or Brezhnev in the Soviet Union. And it wasn't about trying to convince them to adopt America's viewpoint, but rather about fostering a foundation of mutual understanding. Creating a space where dialogue, however difficult, could occur.
It makes you realize that diplomacy, at its core, is about building relationships.
Building relationships.
It's not just about winning arguments. Or imposing your will on others.
Even the most brilliant strategy, the most meticulously planned maneuver, is ultimately only as effective as the relationships that support it. And that takes time, patience, and a willingness to engage with people who might see the world very differently than you do.
It's a reminder that even on the world stage, it's the human element that truly drives those big decisions.
Absolutely.
Speaking of driving decisions, there's another point Kissinger makes about leadership that I found quite compelling. He talks about what he calls the ability to walk alone.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's referring to the courage it takes to make difficult choices. Even unpopular ones, especially when those decisions go against the prevailing wisdom or challenge conventional thinking.
It sounds like he's saying that true leadership is about more than just following the crowd or going with the flow. It's about having the conviction to stand by your decisions, even when faced with criticism or opposition.
Precisely.
And he argues that the truly difficult decisions are often those where there's no clear consensus, where the evidence might be ambiguous, and the potential outcomes are uncertain. It's in those moments of uncertainty that a leader's mettle is truly tested. I can see how that applies to Kissinger's own career. He's certainly faced his fair share of criticism and controversy.
Absolutely.
Did he ever reflect on the weight of those decisions?
He did.
The potential for unintended consequences?
He acknowledges that not all of his decisions had the outcomes he anticipated. There were unforeseen consequences, mistakes were made, and he reflects on those with a degree of introspection. But he also argues that a leader can't be paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes.
Right.
It's about making the best judgment possible with the information you have at the time.
Okay.
Being willing to act.
Yeah.
And crucially, learning from those experiences.
It seems that adaptability is a key component.
It is.
Of this walking alone idea.
Yeah.
Being able to recognize when adjustments are needed, when course correction is necessary.
You've hit on another important point.
Yeah.
Kissinger emphasizes the importance of adaptation, of learning from mistakes and adjusting strategies as circumstances change. He talks about how during the Vietnam War, both he and Nixon had to grapple with their initial miscalculations.
About the conflict's complexity.
That must have been a challenging realization.
It was.
To recognize that their initial assumptions were flawed?
Yeah.
How did they respond to that?
Well, they had to adapt to their approach.
Okay.
Shifting from a focus on achieving a decisive military victory to a more nuanced strategy that emphasized negotiation and a political settlement.
Right.
It was a difficult process, full of setbacks and frustrations, but ultimately it led to the Paris Peace Accords.
Okay.
Which, while not a perfect solution, did offer a temporary reprieve from the ongoing bloodshed.
It's a powerful example of how, even in the face of adversity, even when your initial plans go awry, there's still room for adaptation, for finding new paths forward.
Exactly.
Now, this idea of adaptation also extends to the systems and structures that support leadership.
Kissinger talks extensively about the need to streamline the National Security Council to make it more efficient, more strategically focused, and more responsive to the president's priorities. I can imagine the challenges of managing.
It is a challenge.
Such a complex system.
Yeah.
What were some of the specific changes they implemented to improve the process?
Kissinger describes how they restructure the NSC to avoid the pitfalls of bureaucratic infighting and departmental rivalries that can bog down decision-making. They wanted a system that would allow them to step back, to see the bigger picture, and to make decisions based on a clear understanding of America's long-term interests, not just the crisis of the day.
That's a challenge that every administration faces, balancing those immediate demands with the need for long-term thinking. Did Kissinger offer any insights?
He does.
Into how to navigate that balancing act?
He highlights the critical role of a strong national security advisor, someone who can gather information, challenge assumptions, and present the president with a concise range of options, someone who can help cut through the noise and focus on what truly matters.
It sounds like a role that requires a unique blend of skills, analytical thinking, strategic vision, and the ability to build consensus and manage relationships.
Absolutely.
And Kissinger also stresses the importance of a close collaborative relationship between the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. A partnership built on trust and mutual respect.
It's fascinating how even as we're delving into Kissinger's reflections on leadership and diplomacy, we're also getting these insights into the inner workings of government. The machinery that drives those big decisions that shape our world.
And perhaps the most important takeaway from Kissinger's reflections is his emphasis on the need for a president who is actively engaged in foreign policy, who sets the tone, who articulates the vision, and ultimately who makes those tough calls.
It's a reminder that leadership at the highest levels is not a passive role. It's about active engagement, about setting the course, and about taking responsibility for the decisions that shape the nation's destiny.
And that brings us to a crucial point.
It does.
That Kissinger emphasizes throughout Kissinger on Kissinger. That foreign policy is not some abstract game played on a global chessboard. It has real consequences.
It does.
So real people. It's about understanding that every decision, every action has a ripple effect.
It does.
That extends far beyond the halls of government.
Exactly.
And whether you agree with Kissinger's methods or not, There's no denying that his choices left an undeniable mark on history.
They did.
His story is a reminder.
It is.
That leadership matters.
Yeah.
That the choices made by those in power have the potential to shape the world.
They do.
For better or worse.
Absolutely.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of the immense responsibility that comes with leadership and the importance of understanding the complexities of our interconnected world.
And I think Kissinger leaves us with one final thought-provoking idea.
Okay.
That history is not just something we read about in textbooks. It's something we actively shape every day through our actions, our choices, and our decisions.
It's a call to action for all of us.
It is.
Whether we're diplomats, politicians, or simply engaged citizens.
Right.
The future isn't something that just happens to us.
No, it's not.
It's something we build together.
We build it together.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
We'll be back next time.
We will.
With another fascinating exploration of the ideas and the people who shape our world.
Absolutely.
Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Thank you for tuning in to the Power Book of Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing community. Click the bell icon so you never miss an update. We have so much more inspiring content coming your way.